Okay. All right, well, I'll get started now. So I'm going to talk about pruning and disbudding and do them kind of together because one can do the other at this time of the year. I've been doing this on a regular basis in the last few weeks. So first of all, in pruning, most of the time we prune our camellias after they flower, which is late February through March in our area. And when it comes to small plants, very light pruning, if any, is ever needed. So they just really don't require a lot of pruning when they're young. And I usually tell people sometimes it can be as long as 10 years, but usually it's 5 or 6 and you want to prune them a little bit. But anyway, we have a lot of people, you get large plants because we care for our plants very well and they get really big. Or a lot of times people buy older homes, younger people will buy an older home with these giant camellias and they don't know what to do with them. So one of the things to reduce their size is to what I call rejuvenation pruning, which is to bring them down to about 4 feet off of the ground. And we'll go into that more detail soon. So the other thing about pruning is for larger plants is you want to prune up the limbs from near to the ground so that there aren't any limbs actually touching the ground. Usually you want them at least a foot up above, foot, maybe 2. And one of the reasons for that is that it promotes scale. The limbs that are close to the ground will get scale, and then those scale will move up through the canopy. So by removing the ground limbs, you will reduce your scale incidence. It won't eliminate it, but it will reduce it and you'll have less of a problem. Plus, if you're worried about, things that crawl on the ground, then you can see the ground and that's usually people like to be able to see the ground. So anyway, this time of the year, October through November, is a way to top and prune and disbud all in one operation. And so when we disbud, first of all, we need to disbud because a lot of these plants produce multiple buds at the terminals. And if you don't do that, the flowers will not develop properly. You'll get distorted flowers. So you really only want 1 bud per terminal so that they are not misshapen. And of course, this is the way we produce quality show-winning flowers. Okay, so you also, it's a good idea to reduce the number of flowers on very small or recently planted camellias because it puts more energy into the growth buds for the following season. So it's kind of like a fruit plant. You just don't want to make it bloom too heavily when it's small, and that helps with the transplant process. Okay, and so the other reason to reduce the flowers is to reduce the number to pick up at the end of the season because we need to pick up our flowers as best we can to prevent the occurrence of petal blight. And then an interesting thing I read in one of the old yearbooks was that if you reduce the flower count on your plants, that will actually encourage seed setting. So that's important if you are into hybridizing. So that's something to think about if you're interested in hybridizing. Okay, so this to me is kind of the ideal camellia. It's approximately 6 feet tall. It does have limbs somewhat close to the ground, but everything is at eye level and it's just very, appealing and attractive, but they don't stay like this forever, as we know. They grow and grow and grow and they get like this. Okay, so this is looking up at the top of a plant that's probably at least 10 feet tall. And when they get older like this, they get full of pine straw or all kinds of yard trash that falls from the trees, because most people do have them in the shaded environment. So you want to bring these plants down to where you can enjoy them and to pick your flowers, because you can't pick the flowers that are way up there 8-10 feet off the ground. So this is an example of a very much of an overgrown plant. It's probably at least 8 feet tall, but it's, it's more like, 8 feet wide. It's taking up too much space in your garden, in my garden. This is actually the way it looks today. But a few years ago, this plant was severely pruned in what I called the rejuvenation pruning, and this is what I did to it, okay? So we left, just the main branches, but in reality, I actually left way too many because this plant got a little bit congested. So it's better to do this, to just leave a basic skeleton of the plant. And I know that looks really severe, but believe me, they come back. And this is cut at 4 feet. And the 4 feet is kind of the magic number, being that if you do it higher, all your regrowth is going to be higher and you won't gain anything. And if you do it too low, you get too much regeneration close to the ground that you're going to have to cut off. And so that 4 feet seems to be a really good number to remember. So in this case, all the little limbs are taken off, all the cross limbs are removed, so you just have these nice structure of a plant. Okay, and so this is done in February and March only, this kind of severe pruning. And one of the important things to remember is when you prune these larger limbs, you need to cut.
I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm seeing you only.
You are?
Yes. What have I done or not done? Richard, what have I done?
I can see everything.
You can see everything? Well, when you first came on, it had your talk, but now I just have you.
Oh, okay. Well, then you need to click on sharing, I think.
Ah, there we are. I got it. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Is everybody else good? Okay, good. Okay. So as I was saying, one of the things that you want to do to the larger limbs is cut them at an angle so that water will not sit on there, which can create a rotting limb, which will progress quite a ways on a camellia. So cutting them at an angle is important, okay? And so after, in the case of the first one I showed you where I pruned it, approximately 1 month after it was pruned, you start seeing these little buds come out, and they just come out all over the place, okay? And then as time goes on, those buds develop into short stems and you get all this foliage, and then you get regeneration of this plant. And you can see what I mean about you don't want it to regenerate too low to the ground, which this plant's not. So most of it's right around that 3 foot level. And then this is what that plant looked like in September of the year it was done. So the plant is completely regrown. So the one thing though you do lose, you will not have any flowers the first year after the pruning in this level of pruning. And so on a plant like this, then you really need to kind of go and kind of clean out some of the limbs and get rid of it being so congested. And we'll talk about that a little bit here later. So that's the way that plant ended up looking after a few more years. It's just as full, it's completely regrown. So it needs to be done again. That took about 6 years of growth. Okay, so let's talk a little bit then about disbudding, which is what we do in the fall. So that's what we do in the spring, but in the fall you want to disbud. And of course, you don't want multiple buds on the terminals because again, the misshapen, it causes misshapen flowers. So you get a lot of poor quality flowers instead of one really beautiful flower. And of course, I know some people were talking about jibbing early. So when you remove these buds and it'll leave a scar, then that's actually a great place to apply the jib is in the removed bud scar. Okay. So this fall, what I've been doing is these plants that I have gone through and done regeneration pruning, and these were done 2 years ago. They are really big again, and a lot of them grew straight up in the air. So I'm getting all this growth that's way too high. So I've decided that, well, I can prune and disbud at the same time, because most of the buds are right around the outer edges of the plant. The stuff that's up there like 8 feet tall, I don't really care about because I can't reach it anyways. So I went ahead and took my loppers or my saw and I cut these back. And so this is what I did. I cut these down to approximately, in this case, approximately 6 feet, maybe 5, as low as 5, but 6 feet. But there's still plenty of buds all around the perimeter of the plant. So I, reduced it a lot, but not completely. So we're gonna have some really nice flowers. We're gonna have really nice flowers and nowhere to show them. But anyway, that's another story, right? So one of the things about this late season pruning, though, is that this is a great opportunity to clean out the center of the plant, because the center of the plant is really an area where the flowers don't develop very well because there's too much shade, too much crowding. Also, you're not going to be picking them or jibbing them. So it's a good idea to just remove the center of the plant, kind of hollow it out like a little bird nest kind of effect. And what that does then, and that gets rid of all of those limbs that go straight up in the air, that have the buds way up there in the top that you're not going to reach anyways. So this is just some pictures of hollowing out the center of the plant. You've got a nice kind of plant showing the round, the growth all around on the perimeter, but the middle is gone. And so this is an example of the plant on the left before and then after I've pruned it. And you can kind of see right through it. But you see there's plenty of buds on this. This is a deep secret, and there's a lot of buds still. And those are going to develop really nice because now the plant's not having to support so many flowers. And this is being done in November. Now, one of the things I want to mention is that what I showed you earlier, and I'll just back up to this picture, this was done in September. September is too early. And the reason it's too early is that this is already regrown because we've had so much nice weather. We've got a lot of sprouts that are coming up around these cut areas. So by doing it in October and early November, you're not going to get the regrowth problem. So the plants are going to stay this way until next spring. Okay, so that's something that I learned just by doing. Okay, yes?
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
How about the fall bloomers? I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so we have a distinct winter when nothing is blooming.
Okay.
The fall bloomers, when would you disbud those?
Well, generally, we never disbud the fall bloomers. I mean, like sasanquas, is that what you're referring to?
Right. I have actually coupled that are just jam-packed, and I realized with flowers, and they're totally misshapen. Snowman, winter snowman.
Okay.
They never opened completely. They just rotted because we also had some rain.
Okay.
So I
Well,
thought
in that case, you would have done that about 2 months ago.
Okay, thank
They
you.
would have opened. Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to show you another picture here. This was a Georgia fire that I thinned out. And so now you can see through it, but there's still plenty of buds on it. And my plants have just gotten big. These plants are approximately about 12 to 14 years old. Okay, so one of the things I want to stress about these large cuts, okay, so here I've made some rather large cuts on limbs that were going right up through the center of the plant. I removed those, but one of the things you want to do is you do want to paint those with some sort of either pruning paint or, you know, just any good quality paint that is, you know, something that's not obtrusive looking. And the reason is that these large cuts take a longer time to heal, and that just protects them from the intrusion of dieback and just other wood rotting type fungi that are in the environment. So I really recommend that on anything over 1 inch. Anything less than that, not so much of a problem. Okay. And so here's just another example of the pruning that I've been doing. These were actually pruned not last winter, but 2 winters ago. And they're come back and they finally have buds, but not a whole lot yet. But these plants were so big you could not walk through this area. And so this gives you an idea of what I did. I couldn't walk through here. It was so crowded. So, you know, this was done through regeneration pruning. So next year, these are going to be pruned in more the way I just showed you. I can take out the centers and open them up a little bit so they're not so congested. Okay. So this is and just to give you an idea, so the plant on the left, I actually cut it down as regeneration or rejuvenation pruning, and I did that one in September. And I only did that because the plant was sort of in the way. And I had a big pine tree removed in this garden, and it was just in the way. And I thought, well, if I cut it back, it won't get destroyed by the tree cutter people, and which was true. It did not get destroyed. And I was really quite surprised that it came back. And actually today, I should take a picture of what it looks like after 2 months. It's like a big bush now. It just completely regrew. So these plants are tough. And so the plant on the right is actually the ultimate level of pruning. And this is where you don't like the plant anymore. And you say, I wish it was something different, but rather than digging it up and replacing it, just graft it. So this is kind of the ultimate thing you can do. So this is an older plant that I just didn't want anymore. I changed it to something new. So that's the nice thing about camellias. You get tired of them, you just change them. Okay. Okay, so now if anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself, and then I'm going to show some pretty pictures.
I had a question at Brook Green. I don't know if it was beaver or deer, but they've scarred the trunks, and I wanted to use the spray, the black paint spray, to help that. And they said, no, you know, of course, the feeling is now everything should naturally, it should redo naturally. But I just...
No, the problem with camellias is they're so susceptible to dieback when you have a wound. See, it's a wound. And so you're sealing it from, you know, the dieback, particularly if it's in the summertime when the fungus is active.
Right.
So, no, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. and yeah, on some trees and things that are native, it's not necessary. And that is true. But I think camellias are kind of a different thing to deal with because we have to deal with dieback.
And I thought maybe the black would deter them from coming back and rubbing up against it again. You know, I thought maybe the smell or whatever too it wouldn't be natural wood there. So I thought it would help. But anyway.
No, I don't think that smell won't last very long.
Okay. Okay.
So do we have any other questions?
Mark, were those grafts all the same cultivar?
We're what now?
The grafts on the previous picture.
Yes, those were all the same cultivar.
They don't have to be that, right?
They don't have to be, but I kind of like the bushes to be all the same. Now I have done some multiple varieties on large old plants, and I have
Yeah,
but-
we had two at Edisto that had 3 different blooms on it, but we ran out of space. It was more of
Right.
a
Well,
space.
the
we
only,
didn't-
and that's a great idea, and I know that what's his face? I'm trying to think. Gary Surpass does that all the time, but you got to be really careful that you don't put a variegated scion on an unvariegated rootstock, because you'll ruin everything.
Oh, really?
Because
Oh,
the
really?
virus will travel from one limb to the other over time. So you have to be careful that you don't mix variegated and unvariegated on the same plant.
Huh.
Okay.
Okay. Hmm.
All right. So any other questions? I'm going to go through a few pretty pictures. Okay. So I just thought I would show some newer japonicas that I have that I've been growing here.
Lillian Shining Star.
This is Lillian Shining Star. You got it. It's a beautiful, beautiful new camellia, and it's hard to believe that this is a seedling of whoopee. You know, most of you know what whoopee looks like. It's a little low single cup-shaped thing, but you can kind of see the pointed petals come from the whoopee. So it's just a really, really beautiful flower. Okay, and so this is a new one that I've been working on. This is Wally B variegated, and I variegated this. And Wally B is a plant from the Gordy collection that I always admired it because it reminded me a lot of Grand Marshal, but my problem with Grand Marshal is it's not precocious. You know, you just don't get many blooms on a Grand Marshal, at least in my experience. Well, this Wally will have, the whole thing will be completely covered with flowers. It's just beautiful. And so, of course, that's solid red. And so this variegation has just been outstanding on this particular plant. And what's neat is the guard petals always seem to pick up the variegation almost 100%. Because that's pretty uniform on every flower. Okay, and so this is Lillian Gordy, a new japonica from that collection. That is can be 6 inches across with no jib, blooming right now. It's been blooming since October. It's just absolutely an incredible plant. There is nothing. I think it could be the next Frank Hauser in popularity because it's so early.
I have to go get a pencil and paper.
Okay.
Mark, for those of us who live further north, can you mention, excuse me, if any of them are cold hardy?
I do not know, because these plants are all coming out of a collection in Ocala, Florida. And so cold hardiness is only known if somebody happens to try one further north. Now, I know that Bob Black has got several of these plants, and he would be the person to ask about cold hardiness.
What was the name of this one again, Mark?
This is Lillian Gordy.
You know, for our club, if our show's January 12th, so we really need this one.
Yeah.
We need an early bloomer.
Okay, and so here's another relatively early one. This is Marie Crawford. This is one that the Gordys named for my mother.
Oh,
And I think a lot of people have this already. It's a beautiful pink, full peony, relatively early. Okay, and then this is one of the newest ones I've been working on. This is one I named for my daughter. This is Alice in the Palace.
Oh, yeah.
And that's blooming right now naturally, no jib. course, it's a little warmer here, okay? All right, and then this is one I named for my son, Philip's Choice. And this is just an incredible dark red anemone type flower. And this is early. This is actually in my yard in full bloom. It's got about 6 flowers on it right now, not jibbed. So, so yeah, a lot of this early stuff from the Gordy collection is really nice. And we don't know what makes stuff, because you know, that's where early autumn came from. We don't know. There's something in that collection that imparts earliness when the bees do their thing, but we don't know what it is.
Mark, do you hear me?
Yes?
This is Joe Holmes in Louisiana. This strikes me that it looks a great deal like Takanini, which for me is the first thing that blooms japonica-wise in my garden.
Okay.
And I bloom in September, sometimes early September, and the form is the same. Takanini seems to be a little purpler, and I do occasionally get stamens that poke out there.
Okay.
So I wonder if Takanini might have been something the Gordys had in their garden.
Oh yeah, they had a gigantic one. Gigantic. So that's very possible. Okay.
Yes.
And this is one from Mobile. This is Cleo Glidden Aries. It's a really cool flower with this really neat arrangement of petals. Okay, and then this is a new one from the Nichols in Dothan, Alabama, called Virginia Lynn, and this is also early.
Hello, Glendon.
Just started blooming now.
Could you repeat the name of that last flower you had?
Cleo something.
This one, that's Cleo Glidden Aries.
Glidden Eris. Okay.
Yes.
Is that form typical, Mark?
Yes, it's, yeah. I mean, everyone won't look like that, but I would say more than 50% of them look like that. Okay. Okay, Virginia Lynn. I love Virginia Lynn. It kind of reminds me of pink seafoam, and it's a great grower. Okay, and then this is, you're going to read about this one in the next ACS journal and my column on 21st century camellias. This is Herbert Earl Gatch, probably one of the best new stripes. It's just a really striking plant.
Could you say that again, Mark, please?
It's Herbert Earl Gatch. And you get to read, if you get the ACS journal, you get to read all about that name, because that was kind of a weird thing to find out. I'm not going to spoil the read for you, okay?
Mark, would you spell some of these as you go along? Because what we're writing down may be very poorly related to what you're actually reading.
Oh, okay.
I've got Herbert Earl, but the last one I'm
It's
sure I didn't.
Gatch. It's Gatch.
Gatch. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. And then this is Julius Nucio. That's that's winning shows, at least here. Large red flower.
It's patented, I'm afraid.
What was that?
I think it's is it patented?
It is patented. I cannot produce it, but you know, people can graft it if they want to, or you can buy one from Nucio's. Okay, and then, this is Louise Fitzgerald.
Oh, yeah.
And this flower, to me, is the most reminiscent of a hibiscus flower I've ever seen in a camellia, because it's nice and flat. It always has that beautiful white edge. It's just an outstanding plant, and it just blooms really heavy. You know, this is a sport of sweetie pie.
Mm-hmm.
And what size is that, please?
Oh, it's a very large.
Very large. Okay.
And it's relatively early. It's just showing color right now. not open yet.
Yeah.
Because like some other folks were saying, I haven't jibbed a lot of my collection this year because there are no shows and I'm not going to plant shows and so forth. So I've only jibbed just a few things.
Of
Okay.
course, we're what, 15 degrees colder than you are? 10 degrees colder, maybe. So,
Yeah. And then this is Ella Jo. And this is just a really fine, small to medium camellia that I think is prettier than Pink Perfection because of those pointed petals. It's a great plant. That came from the Hardison collection in Tallahassee. And that is a mid-season flower. And then, of course, I have to show you Tamalok Laurel. My Tama, a seedling that I grew. And what's really neat about Tamalok, if most of you are probably familiar with the Tamas, that they all are kind of weepy plants. They like to have, weeping branches. And this is an upright grower. It grows really just like royal velvet. I call it a soldier in the pot. It's just upright in every regard. So it's a really great yard plant.
I won a runner-up with that at Dothan 2 years ago.
Well, great. Okay. This is one of the newest registrations from Howard Rhodes. This is Pink Kiss. And this is a mid to late season flower. Pink Kiss. It's got just great color. And that's it, folks. And I appreciate your attention.
Your
Well, thank you, Mark.
Mark, I have a question on Tamalok.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you grow that one from seed in Virginia?
No, that was grown from seed here in Valdosta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's actually a seedling of Tama Electra is the seed parent. Okay. Any other
Mark?
questions? Yes.
Yes, Mark. You had mentioned spraying paint on that large cut. Is that a special brand name that you recommend for that paint, or what is it?
Well, you can buy a pruning paint. They are pruning paints available, which is kind of a tar-like material. The one I use is a copper-based paint. That's something that I have access to.
Okay.
Okay.
just be careful with it because it goes everywhere.
Oh, the spray can. Yeah, you can you can get it in a can too, I believe.
Yeah, I have the spray can, and then you gotta make sure you put something in it so it doesn't clog up, so you can use it.
Oh yeah, right.
it's
Well,
a
I
pain.
use a little paintbrush, so I don't have that problem.
Yeah.